Hello, my name is Aaron Carty. I am the head of marketing for UK Black Pride. I am also an ex-police officer, so I have the, let's say, benefit of having been a black gay police officer. That unique experience I've had has really driven me to promote change, share educational content, and more importantly, use my time to help those who can't help themselves, especially when it comes to using my voice and my platform. I've wanted to do this masterclass on social media pretty much since the Black Lives Matter movement really took haste, especially in the UK, following the death of George Floyd. We found people sharing videos online, commenting about them, obviously enraged by the tragedies that have happened, especially what is happening in the UK, specifically in London, with the protests during the COVID-19 pandemic. We're finding that the media are really gaslighting any race bait clicking, and it's important for us to understand how we're being used, how social media are being used, and how, as you, as an activist, can use your platforms for good. Later, I'll be talking with an ex-police officer who I actually trained with and getting their up-to-date views. Now, Richard worked for the police for 15 years and has recently left, but at the same time, he has a great experience of dealing with a wide variety of people, including terrorists. So I'm hoping he's going to be able to give us some insight into how social movements, more importantly on social media, really impact the police and their work. I've written a piece over the last 3 weeks, which I'm going to share with you now, and hopefully give you some points to take away at the end. Communication and media can be positioned as a pivotal component in a wide variety of mobilisations and struggles throughout history. A social movement is a social process through which people articulate their interests, voice grievance and critiques, and propose solutions to identified problems by engaging in a variety of collective actions. These movements have three features. They are conflictual and have clearly identified ideological opponents. They are structured through dense informal networks, and they are geared towards developing, sustaining and sharing collective identities. The emergence of digital networks has led to the convergence of channels of distribution and communication formats, including social media. The profound impact of network technologies and societies economically and socially and politically has led to some to claim that we are entering a new era of information. As much as social media is a powerful tool, skeptics are seeing the opportunities for disadvantaged groups to self-represent themselves, communicate independently and organise transnationally. Social media are playing an increasingly constitutive role in organising social movements and in mobilising on a global level. Social media enable activists and protest movements to self-mediate and to distribute movement goals or frames more easily. Social movement and activists have always done this, but social media are said to greatly increase the capacity to transmit text and visuals. It is often argued that social media potentially provide new opportunities for people and groups in society to bypass the mainstream media to narrate their collective identities and experiences. The filming of police behaviour during demonstrations can be seen as a passive-aggressive counter-tactic to monitor and expose police. Social media are used to distribute content uploaded by protesters which can go viral and may be picked up by mainstream internal media. But we do need to learn from the past. Young people tend to be comfortable with change. Their instant adoption of technology is an example. However, they may lack an understanding of the more permanent realities. This wisdom is typically in the hands of individuals who either work within systems or have accumulated far more tenure. The 13-year-old activist Naomi Wadler, who said, "We can educate our youth a lot better. We're not delving deeper into social justice movements from the past." Unlike civil rights movements of the 1960s, Black Lives Matter lacks central governance. This means that opponents can attack its leadership as a means to discredit the whole movement. In the 1960s, this is exactly what happened to the civil rights movement when critics went after Martin Luther King, stalling the collective efforts of the movement. By studying the legacy of previous efforts, Black Lives Matter has managed to rally approximately 75% of the American public, a feat that will undeniably ensure longevity of its cause. Social activists really need to avoid the heropreneurship. Daniela Papi Thornton first coined the term heropreneurship to describe a growing trend that credits social change to the founder of an organisation or movement exclusively. This culture has inspired an entire generation of young change makers who are swayed by the allure of the heroic founder and whose behaviours are validated through youth awards, grants, and speaking circuits that glorify a role in the limelight. This persuasive culture undercuts the entire spectrum of people that really create social change. I've seen this across the LGBTQI community, especially across social media. You'll see articles of individuals in the same publications who'll continue to tell yet another story of their own experiences instead of using that platform to amplify the voices of the wider movement. I personally get annoyed to seeing activists post selfies alongside statements, but that's just my preference. Changemakers should consider the root cause that uphold inequalities and then map the existing players and solutions. This process might point to scaling up the work of an existing organisation than starting your own. This is exactly my experience in joining UK Black Pride. For people who wish to create social change, their efforts, while extremely important, may go unnoticed. This is an expectation that needs to be managed. Social media has traditionally been recreational and superficial, with hashtag activism being more performative than revolutionary in nature. Now, as the world ignites with social movements and the generation that grew up socialising digitally comes of age, social media is a far more serious tool for change. Social media has become a source of raw, live information, of crowdsourced imagery, of police brutality. It's become a tool to summon protesters on the ground and coordinate movements in real time, often fighting police efforts to erect barricades and intimidate protesters. Rallies, vigils, marches and protests are planned the night before by different organisations, all fighting for the same goal and coordinating both on and off social platforms. The unsavvy searching on social media for intel can be daunting, but not for the Gen Z, who are plugged into their phones at all times and can find order in the chaos of the mind hive. Once you do figure out which Instagram account has the latest information, you can be assured that you'll be up to date every few minutes by checking the account's Instagram stories. Other than being the main source for flyers and updates about demonstrations and police whereabouts, social media has become a home for all kinds of useful information about the protests that thousands repost every day. Your local activist groups might post everything from which solicitors to contact if you get arrested, what to do if you're exposed to tear gas or mace, to calls for dermatologists to sponsor those on the front line whose skin is breaking from wearing gas masks. We've all heard hashtag activism, a new term for this type of movement, and it has been used to refer to the act of showing support for a cause through a like, share, or other engagement. There are cases where hashtag has created a larger movement, notably in the cases of Me Too, Never Again, and Black Lives Matter. But critics have questioned whether this activism actually leads to any real change, or whether users simply indicate support without taking any meaningful action. This could be a contrast to the long-accepting definition of activism, which defined in the 1960s as the policy of practicing, of doing things with decision and energy. Posting to social media can be seen as actually doing something with decision, but is it actually using the energy to necessitate any change? President Obama didn't quite say it this way, but people who rely exclusively on social media to advocate causes are just plain lazy and self-righteous. Triggering and sustaining meaningful change is arduous stuff. It is more about deeds than words, and these days, words are cheaper than ever. Social media is the latest platform to spread a message and call for social action. In some ways, it has become the new soapbox for those to stand on, but without the effort of actually climbing onto a box or going to a location. Because it is so accessible, the ability for a cause to gain traction and to go viral can be challenging. Despite this fact, social media could still be an important part of any movement. The key to its success could depend on how it is best utilised. Some people are generally motivated to do good, and they might use social channels to take on injustice or promote causes that make the world better. An alternative explanation for some of the activism we see on the web is internally motivated. Some people use their profiles and interactions as a way of representing themselves to the world as they wish they were. Their profiles, images, posts, and responses are kind of performative or a way of defining oneself, but in this case, online. Deciding whether activism on social media does any good is a complex question. Depending on the issue, people trust advice from different groups. There is a good chance that posts from close friends will resonate with users since people have homophilous tendencies. That is, they tend to connect with and share views of people just like themselves. So it's reasonable that activists' posts will get a reaction locally in someone's social network. It's less likely that someone's tweet or status update will go viral and have the kind of impact they hope for. For most of us who are not celebrities or influencers, going viral is sheer dumb luck. I'd like to introduce you now to Richard. Now, Richard and I started the police together in 2005, and he's recently left the police 15 years later. I left probably over 10 years ago now. So he has a much more up-to-date idea of what the police are now doing in these situations. So let's have a listen to the conversation I had with Richard yesterday, and I'll give you my thoughts of that afterwards.
So I'm joined here with Richard. Richard and I joined Essex Police at exactly the same time in the same training group in 2005.
Yes.
4, 5, something like that. So long time, long time ago. 2005. Obviously, we've both left the police now, but here, today I'm talking about how people are using social media for awareness and as part of their own activism as well. But obviously, we're getting a lot of conflicted issues at the moment. There's a lot of people that are recording things, posting them online, really focused on the police. And obviously, I wanted to get your experience of that as a police officer, but also someone that is posting online at the moment as well. So my first question to you is, what makes you want to post something online versus not doing so?
What do you want to get from it? That's the first question. What do you gain from it? If it's something negative, all you're going to get is negative back, and the fallout from that can be huge. The thing is, when you post something and you don't get the facts, we blame the media straight away. We're so quick on blaming the media. We don't think that we are part of the media now. The social world is, excuse me, because I can't hear my voice very well. The social media is such a quick response. I mean, I'm no expert on social media. I went on Twitter years ago, came off it because I didn't figure it out, and I'm back on it now. And I realized that Twitter is a more powerful tool than any of the other social media because everybody sees it. You can't hide from it. You can't, it goes out there. But when I post something and hope that people see for what it is, not what they perceive it is. It's a hard one to say, really. How do I explain it? I don't post something that's biased. If something's wrong, I'll call them wrong. Don't matter who they are, don't matter what job they do. I am not a biased person at all. I've lived a very diverse life. Hence why if we can't keep the equilibrium, we're just going to rock the boat for whose benefit.
And I think when we talk about, let's talk about, specific police examples as well, because I think, we're getting a lot of people at the moment, they'll post something and it may be 6 or 7 police officers tackling one person to the ground. And obviously a lot of people, when you see it, if you don't know what they're doing, it can look quite overpowering. It can look quite excessive. But would you just explain the difference between, why police officers take down one person, why 6 or 7 police officers would take down one person?
Oh, if you're a 6'6" guy, we spoke about this earlier, didn't we? If you're a 6'6" guy, police officer, and you're taking on somebody that's, I don't know, 5'9", you think that's easy. So when that 5'9" guy, no matter what he's doing, he might be on drugs, or he might be even stronger than he normally is because it tends to take off your inhibitions. it's going to cause him to use more force from one direction to put somebody on the ground. Yes, he's bigger than him. He's going to look worse. But if you've got 6 people taking the same guy down, they don't have to use very much force. It's very little force. It's controlled. We're trained to do it that way. The guy near the head of that person they're dealing with is in control, and he calls out the orders to make sure the safety of that person all times. But you've got to consider your own safety. Now, when you can outnumber a subject, no matter who it is, you can be more cautious. You can't be so cautious of yourself. You've got to be more protective when it's just one person, and that's why it looks worse when there's more people. But it's more controlled and it's safer.
For sure. And I think, I've had experiences of that. I was 19 in the police, and I remember having to, take down suspects. And when there's just 1 or 2 of you, it's really scary. Not just scary because can we get him down? Can we, if he's not, if he's not complying with orders, and we can't cuff him safely, we're having to call for backup. And I think people are sharing things online, maybe not understanding, kind of what you've just said, that, the police are trained in this way. And for me, I think a big part of that is that they're seeing so many videos online at the moment from, police in America, and how, they're using force, which, I think anyone can see in a lot of cases, it feels quite excessive. What would you say to that?
The thing is, the problem we got at the moment is they're westernizing police, as all police all over the Western world are all the same. They're all trained the same. They're not trained the same. They're not thinking the same because they're different cultures. What somebody in a police officer in, say, Alabama, it's not going to think the same as a police officer from Essex. They're not brought up in the same area. They're not trained in the same. So they can't expect them to be all the same. So just because of uniform, you cannot generalize. There is excessive force seen by people, police everywhere in the world, but that is that person, not the uniform. And that is the problem. And because we generalize, all we're doing is we're creating more division. We're not fixing the problem, we're creating more problems.
That's so true. And I think, you said something really poignant in terms of, these, we call them social media activists, and they're people out there that really want to be part of the conversation. They're sharing things. Maybe they're sharing things without actually reading into them, or just reading a title and sharing a video without actually knowing the context of that. How much harm do you think these social media activists are doing to the perception of the police in the UK?
Well, the first thing is, are they an activist or a troll? That's my first question. Are you on there because you want to do good in the world, or on you because you like to spoil things for others? We all need to share things that's gone wrong. It needs to be put out there. I mean, for example, what's going on in Hong Kong right now. If it's not shared, the world is ignorant to it. So the world needs to know, but you cannot blame everybody, put everybody under the same umbrella. What happened to George Floyd was absolutely terrible. And that is nothing like in the UK trained. We automatically know you lay a guy that's thick set, large build on their chest, they can suffocate without needing a knee on their chest. They can just lay there in handcuffs and they would suffocate. It's called positional asphyxia, right? It's because they're so big built, the pressure on their lungs cannot fill properly. So the diaphragm's not going to work properly. We know that. As soon as you get them down, you've got to lay them on their side so they can still breathe, right? So it didn't matter whether his knee was on his back. His knee was on his back, just added to the aggravation. And it looked better for the media to hate.
And I think that will
in America, America is not united. We've seen that more and more now. It's in the media. Every state has their own rules. We've seen how Trump says, I'm going to do this. And then the mayor of that state says, well, you can't do that. You're not in charge. We are. So if every state's different, then every state's going to train their officers different. So how are you going to change? You've got to have all the same training. what the causes are, what they reflect, cause and effect. The same as media trolls, media activists, and everything else. Cause and effect. What you're going to gain out of it when you post it. There are times I've seen people post things up there, and it enrages me. And then I start writing something. I think, no, what's the point? This person mindset is already set for what they believe. So all I'm going to do is aggravate that person. I'm not going to help change their mind and make them see different.
I mean, you've got a vast experience, in the army and then in the police. And in both of those jobs, what would you say the percentages of, the amount of diversity that you've had to deal with people as suspects and as the public?
I mean, the army days. I mean, I joined the army, and we see each other as equal. I did, Sorry, I've got a delivery coming because there's got people forgetting a fence at the moment. That's why it's just distracting me over there. When I joined the army at 16. I grew up in a very poor background, but I joined the cadets, gave me a direction, and that made me want to join the army. So I joined the army at 16. I never grew up in an area that had any racial bias, any race thought. Never crossed my mind of different races. They were there, that they just were people. So when I joined the army, and there was every culture in the army, it was just carrying on. It was not decided we are different. We're all the same. I've never come across racism in the army, so I kind of grew up in that environment where we're all diverse, but we don't see each other as different. And when I joined the police, you work in certain areas. If you're dedicated to certain areas, you would be in that community. Now, if that community is not diverse, then you're going to be in that particular bubble, and then you'd stay in that bubble. But I was a community beat officer for a while. We had to create community meetings, so I had to create a diverse group to meet. So I did. I mean, I met the Muslim community, Jewish community, and everything. It wasn't something I felt awkward about because I just saw them as people. And and people understand that. If you don't understand somebody's culture, a decent person will show you what you don't know about that culture. It's not ignorance. It's just that you've got a short lifespan. You can't learn everything. So over time, I kind of I don't know. It didn't seem like it. I had to think about it. I had to learn about it. And when I moved into a particular area where I dealt with more people coming from abroad than anywhere else, then my expansion of understanding got even broader. And it took meeting more Islamic people, Muslims of many different Islamic faiths. They educated me, but through conversation, not through me challenging them or anything else. So I don't know. It's unless you educate yourself, unless you travel or meet people of different backgrounds, you will always live in that bubble, and you will never understand. And you will always assume that you're either always the victim because you're told you're the victim, or you're always the perpetrator because people assume you are.
Definitely. I think bringing it back to then, if you've had quite a wealth of experience, dealing with a diverse range of people, obviously, you can project that across everything that you do, kind of in your job. I guess the difficulty then comes from people that are sharing things online who haven't had that that diversity, whether in their workplace or in their home.
Thing is, diversity comes from experience. You cannot read it and think, yeah, I know what it's all about. You've got to experience it. I saw a quote. I'm a stickler for quotes and things like this, and I saw one I shared recently, where life is basically a book, and you have to read every line of every chapter to understand the book. That's the same as life. You cannot skip and think you know everything on chapter 5 when you haven't done the other chapters. And I thought that's very apt. That is how life is. I'm no expert, but I feel I've been very experienced. I was in the army. I worked in factories for a long time. I was a train driver for a while as well. I've done so many different jobs, so I've met different people from different lifestyles. And
I mean, that's quite interesting.
I think
going to say with
yeah. Go on. Sorry.
I was going to say with what you say there is quite interesting in terms of you need to read the whole story, before you can comment on it. And do you think obviously the impact that social media has, especially with the media, people are sharing things without knowing the whole story. So bringing it back to you as a police officer, when you see people posting things online, and it's only obviously half the story, how does that make you feel in terms of the comments that come from that?
Sad, frustrated. There's a story I've seen very recently. I think it was day before yesterday, about a black lady in America that was shot in her house by a police officer, and everybody's saying the police officer should be done for murder. So I thought, well, what's all that about? So when I looked it up, and I mean, there's only so much access you can get on the internet. You don't know all the facts, because not all the facts ever get on the internet, especially when there's an ongoing case. The first thing, the article I read was that her partner is a known drug dealer, and the officers had a no knock warrant, and it's not something you have in the UK. They have a no knock warrant, whereas they can break in because obviously there must be a reason that this person's dangerous. So if they knock, they're more likely to get shot. They're saying that she was murdered in her sleep. Some people are saying that. I don't know whether she was or not, but I doubt she was. The fact that her boyfriend shot a police officer before they opened fire. I mean, that's just one example. I don't know the whole facts of it, but I'm just saying that the only thing that people shared on it was that, oh, she was justice for her. She was murdered in sleep. They skipped the bit that her partner was a drug dealer and he opened fire on the police first.
And I think it's important that we say it's the media reporting that are skipping facts a lot of the time. Like you say, we're when we're on social media, we're looking at the things that come through. A lot of the time whatever comes from the media, we will take as gospel. So when they are missing out certain facts, it's obviously quite difficult to garner enough of a story to have an opinion. But I feel a lot of the time the media will push this kind of more of a race clickbait.
Absolutely,
comment,
clickbait.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
There's lots of stories going around, because over time, if you watch the media over time, you start getting other stories coming out of how this narrative came about. There's stories about Democrats pushing for votes. They need change in the police, so they need to push Trump out or stuff like that. There are articles going around that to get a president in, half the time is about laws and changing the laws to feel people need protecting again. It's almost, if we promote fear, we will protect the life out of you. But that's a US mentality. There are many articles out there. If you go on documentaries on Netflix showing you about these articles. Yes, there's always going to be racial bias in some places, of course, but not everywhere is racial bias. So don't assume that everybody's racist all the time. Sometimes you didn't get that job because you weren't good enough for that job. Don't assume that person is a racist, justifying why you didn't get the job. As going back to the problem with the media is, I spoke earlier on. There's Denzel Washington was speaking to the press, and they were asking him a question. I can't remember the question off the top of my head, but what did stick in my head was he said to this press, this lady that was recording him, he said to her, he said, the problem we have is, he says, you'll get trying to think the words how it went now. The problem with the media is they have to be first. He said, if you don't read any newspapers, you're not informed. But if you read lots of newspapers, you're misinformed. So what do? He said, the problem with the press now is they have to be first to get the story out. Doesn't matter whether it's true, we just got to be first. Because if we wait to find out the facts, somebody else will beat us out there and we won't be the first to get it out. And that's the problem with media now. And that media, everything on the media is a 10-second thing. Everybody scrolls through their media and they see what catches their eye. That's how advertising works. And now people are using race bait as their advertising. So if they can do a shock factor, you stop and look at it. Oh my God, look at this. But you don't know the whole story. You just think that bit's bad. But that bit will always be bad. Right?
Yeah.
This copper who don't deserve to be a copper was bad. We don't know the whole story. We don't know how it got to that. And the reason things fall down in court is because we don't know the whole story. And when it goes to court, they get the whole story and they know why they get to that narrative. Now we've seen all the problems with the LA riots and all that from misjustice. Absolutely, there was misjustice. It was way misjustice over there where things happened there. And you see why people riot. But the riots didn't get anywhere. It did not get anybody anywhere. We just carried on. It all calmed down and everybody moved on again. So what was the point? Nobody pushed for what needed changing, and it's still allowed to go on.
And I think that's a really good point you raised there in terms of, you've obviously got a very diverse friends group, and when you start seeing different people post things online, I mean, do you have any friends that would consider themselves doing sorry, let me say that again. Do you have any friends that would claim to be activists and really looking to push educational content out there to make change?
Yeah, this one I'm talking to right now. That's it. That is it.
Yeah.
I got friends from all walks of life. Going back to the army, I've got on my Facebook, I'm still in touch with about 50 or 60 ex-army friends. I left that 30 years ago. They joined me to other military groups, which only for the military, only got ex-military on there because they have their banter and all that on there. But I've broke up with friends over the years when the media was more about Islam and the threat to the UK and all this. When it wasn't a threat to the UK, there was a minority threat to the UK. But it's the same example everywhere. The story's the same. A small group destroy it for the rest. It's the same narrative, just put on a different uniform, put on a different skin. It's the same narrative. You get the small group, destroy it for the rest. And if I went back to years ago when I was dealing with, I would deal with more Muslim people than anybody else in the police because of my line of work. I sympathised with them. I felt sorry for them. It was almost like they were made to feel guilty for what they do, and they're peaceful people. And I ended up breaking up friends with people I were friends with back in the army because they had right-wing mentality, and they were blinded. They wouldn't listen to anything because they were in their bubble, and they've lived all their life in that bubble, and they don't believe anything else. Because what was the quote? If you tell a lie long enough, people are going to believe it. And the hardest thing to change is finding out that you've been lied to, because your mind is set for that narrative.
Yeah, that's really true. So, I mean, if you say, apart from myself, you don't really have any other friends that are, who are, pushing, activism. What other friends do you have that are pushing content on social media? Well,
I mean, as a photographer, my diverse friends have expanded even more and more, especially through the cosplay world and all this. And a lot of them are promoting Black Lives Matter, but all they're doing is putting up. They're not doing anything. They're not going around, debating, talking, going to meetings about it or anything. I've seen it on Twitter. A lot of people I've changed their names with BLM at the end of it. And I can't help think that it's a bandwagon for self-promotion rather than you genuinely are trying to change something for somebody. But
absolutely.
But the thing is, if you label the UK or any other country the same as the US, you're not changing anything because you're attacking the wrong people. It's obvious there is a massive race problem in the US in certain areas, but the US is massive.
Yeah,
but it needs to change there.
You're right, and that's a really good point that we talk about when we talk about kind of activism. We talk about how everyone's getting involved, they're jumping on the bandwagon, they're posting stuff, but that's all they're doing. You know, are they doing anything else? And you raise a good point, which I'm talking about later in terms of self-promotion. You know, people are using, you know, these causes for their own, you know, for their own gain.
If I say this, I'm going to get more people to like me. Like you for who you are. Don't be an empty box. You know, what's your next activism to make people like you? Like you for what you do. If you're a photographer, like you for your artwork, not for what anything else. Yeah. Prime example, yesterday I was on Twitter, and there's a place, Petapixel, they put up something about Nikon adding 2 more black photographers as their ambassadors, creating more diversity. I said, why do they need to say they're creating more diversity? Are Nikon just promoting themselves to say, look at us, we're good, we're adding more black people? Why don't you just say, look at these great photographers and forget about their color? If we stop talking about the difference of each other and say, look at us for how good we are, then maybe we can change the narrative. We're not going to move on if we keep finding reasons for being different.
Do you know what? That is probably a really good way to end it. Look, Rich, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to just get, you know, your insight on it with your experience, and obviously with your, you know, your diverse background as well within your career. So thank you very much for that.
All right, mate. No worries. Glad I can help.
It's interesting to hear Richard talk about how I'm the only friend he has who is sharing educational content out there. And that's really interesting because I feel a lot of people are sharing opinions, and a lot of talks that I've done recently, I've really tried to express that at the moment, our opinions aren't important. What's important is using our energy and our voice to really help the individual movement. I'm sure you've had it yourself, but opinions only spark debate. Now, that debate online can get very vicious very quickly, and a lot of people will say a lot of things that they don't actually mean. You've only got to read any comment section of any post related to Black Lives Matter to find that. So let's talk about the future of hashtag activism. The pen is mightier than the sword. Now, particularly written words along with a free press can be more effective than direct violence, and that's something to remember when we are out there protesting. To that end, social media has already proven that it can be effective in spreading the word to the like-minded and help bring about social change. Crowdfunding, charitable donations, and the location of food banks that advance appetite are just a few examples of efficiencies and effectiveness that rival free enterprise systems. Of course, social media can change the world, for better or worse. Influencers and organisations could also use these channels to create awareness to a cause. If someone has a good message, connects with other influencers, is consistent in contributing content that their followers value, the ground is fertile for promoting and motivating action. Also, so many people now get their news on social media from reliable sources, trusted independent bloggers, and often from opinion mongers. If you want to learn about something before the BBC, look at Twitterverse. Of course, in the end, getting the message out there is just one part of it. Social media can call the world to action, but the issue is whether anyone listens. So there's a few lessons I want to leave you with. Lesson 1, integration is key. 91% of these political advocacy groups understand the power of having a coordinated front in the social media space. They don't pursue a disparate set of under-coordinated tactics, but rather use all 3 of the major platforms in an integrated way to engage social media users, whether they already spend their time online. Consider that the average Facebook user spends 55 minutes on site each day, 50 million tweets are sent every 24 hours, 2 billion views are watched on YouTube every day. Haphazard outreach to just one of these platforms misses the mark widely, sacrificing a significant return on investment. Lesson 2, listen before you engage. Then engage in a sustained value-driven dialogue. Studies finding shows a deepening understanding that social media are not about advertising or push messaging. They're about connecting with people and building sustained credibility. The average political advocacy Twitter account, for example, follows more than 2,000 people. Right of centre Twitter accounts follow twice as many as they do left of centre ones. These groups are encouraging interaction with their stakeholders by highlighting their viewpoints, as 76% of all advocacy groups retweet content from other sources. Most of the organisations have kept their Facebook pages open to community comments, a bold move embracing a vibrant give and take. Liberal groups are significantly more open than conservative ones to this form of disclosure. Lesson 3, turn online interaction into offline action. Political groups are keenly aware of the current limitations of online interaction. Facebook followers and YouTube videos cannot by themselves drive legislation and change. For the social space to have real relevance in the political arena, it must have a concrete offline effect. 61% of the advocacy groups on Twitter and 56% of those on Facebook aggressively use their platforms and communities to drive followers to contact elected leaders, write letters, and lobby change. I hope that you've been able to take something away from this masterclass, and as I said earlier, please take some of this offline and hope to make change. Do go to prideinside.uk to look at what other events we